It's very positive. It's been a good movement over the last 3 quarters where our growth rates picked up. I think we surprised the market a little in Q4. Our growth rate stepped up to 12%. We followed that up in the first 3 months of this year, 12%, and in Q2, 16%. And this is all being driven by markets outside of the UK.
It looks very good, Steve, but what are the main challenges for the global recruitment market?
I think making sure you're in the right geographies at the right time, and there's some massive geographies that are very underexploited from a recruitment perspective, so a really big opportunity for us, and we planned for that, and so we've laid down the foundations, and now it's taking advantage of them.
Talking about opportunities, which are your growth areas? Which are the markets that you're focusing on going forward?
Well, we have many, but I think if you were to summarise it in 5, we have 5 high potential markets, which are very large in size as well. The US is one, no surprise, one of the world's biggest economies, if not the biggest. China, arguably, they're right up there as well. And again, very little competition. Southeast Asia, again, very little competition. Latin America, the same. And then Germany, very underdeveloped from a recruitment perspective. Although most people in Europe would assume it's sort of ahead, it's clearly the biggest economy. They're behind the rest of Europe as well. So all of them are a really big opportunity for us to grow.
This is really interesting, talking about Germany. Why is the market there so underdeveloped?
Oh, when you go back, and I've been in recruitment a long time with Page for 30 years now, and when I go back to when I first started, it was actually illegal to hold a database of CVs. And as a result, businesses like us couldn't thrive. And so it was basically run by a lot of local German boutiques. And it's fair to say, if you look on the German culture of being quite conservative in terms of the frequency they'd move jobs and so on, that's not the same today. You know, young Germans want different opportunities. If they're not getting them where they are, then they'll change. And they want to work flexibly in different ways. So there's been the emergence of a temp market and the emergence of a contract market. And so big players like ourselves can take advantage of that. And today we're growing at 25% and have been now for some time. So that's good.
If we talk about the euro area, Eurostat says that the unemployment rate in the continent, in the Eurozone, is about 8% at the moment. This is the lowest rate since the financial crisis in 2008. Yep. Is the picture really looking that rosy?
Oh, look, it is. And even in the UK, where you mentioned there was a slump, I mean, I don't know that it's as bad as that, but we're down a couple of percent in the UK, and we've got very, very high employment at the moment, which is a good thing. I have to say, in the areas that we recruit, which is the white-collar professional market, you've pretty well got full employment anyway. And we didn't have it in 2009 during the GFC, but we've always had a higher level of employment than you would perhaps have in the blue-collar space.
So which industries do you see performing the best? Where does the employment come from?
Literally all over. And I have to say that almost without exception. You see an emergence of new ones that are becoming more and more important with ageing population, clearly, and Switzerland very much the case as well. There's been the emergence of healthcare and life sciences, and you know, that's going to be a huge sector going forward. But really all others as well. I mean, we're finding all the technical disciplines such as engineering, supply chain, logistics. We all buy, for example, in a different way. We expect stuff to be delivered to our homes in a timely way, fast. You know, you don't want to order something today and receive it in a week. You want to receive it tonight. And so the logistics and supply chain markets are huge. And, you know, Europe and the rest of the world are investing in infrastructure and building. And so property and construction, again, a booming sector.
But let's be honest, Steve, we have a big elephant in the room, which is called Brexit, and things cannot look that rosy all the time. There's definitely a lot of challenge ahead of us. Sure. So how is that, including the slowing growth in the UK, impacting the recruitment sector?
It's all down to uncertainty. And you're right, I live in London, and I see the television and I see the news, and it's frustrating because clearly we voted to go out of Europe. And the process of getting there and understanding exactly what it means for us in trade deals, in terms of freedom of movement, borders, all sorts of different things. The uncertainty of what that might look like when it's all defined and decided and agreed means that people are perhaps dissuaded from moving jobs.
So what do you advice as a recruitment consultant in this uncertain environment? Do you tell them just to hold on to their jobs or still look elsewhere to keep all options on the table?
It depends. I think we're all at different stages in life. I think if you've got a lot of responsibilities, maybe a mortgage, maybe you've got children at school to worry about or be concerned about, then clearly the decision is a lot more profound and important to you than perhaps if you're at the start of your career and you're young, more mobile, more flexible, in which case I would say I wouldn't worry too much. I mean, the UK economy is still one of growth, albeit very, very modest growth, and the outlook may be a little uncertain, but you know, you're young, you can afford to still look at different industries and explore your opportunities and how you want to work and where you want to work, and you can do that even while Brexit's defined. If you're perhaps at the more senior level and you've got more responsibilities, then I would say it's worth being a little bit cautious. But I think with the right advice, and hopefully we can help in that process, people are still moving successfully and progressing their careers. I would also add, the world is becoming smaller and people are moving around the world, and we're seeing that happen. And that's been before Brexit and after. But always, you know, if you have the flexibility to do it, always look further afield as well for opportunities.
Maybe including looking to Switzerland, right? Because I guess a lot of your clients in the banking and financial industry, they consider moving elsewhere to Zurich or Frankfurt, Paris. What kind of trends are you seeing?
I think there's a lot of hype around potentially a lot of UK companies moving to Frankfurt, Paris, Zurich, whatever. We're actually seeing very little evidence of that actually happening. So I think, of course, there's a lot of negotiation going on and we have to expect that. And you see heads of banks talking about how they were spotted in Frankfurt and they were talking to private schools and booking some spaces for their future of the future employees' children and this sort of thing. I think that's a certain amount of negotiation and rather than actual reality. And so strangely enough, or coincidentally enough, our banking business in the UK at the moment is growing faster than the rest of our UK business. So,
why is that, do you think?
Look, I think they still need to perform, and the financial services industry at the moment is doing quite well worldwide. And when we look at how we're performing in other cities around the world, it's going well. And at the moment, without any clarity on Brexit, I think the reality is that London is still a very important banking centre, and you know, if you need talent, you've got to hire it.
Have you noticed any impact from Brexit on the Swiss labour market?
No.
Any changes? Not at all.
Not at all. And look, will there be when Brexit gets decided? Obviously, it depends on what Brexit looks like. I don't think necessarily a huge implication to the Swiss economy. I hope not. You know, as you say, Switzerland's an exciting and an interesting place to work, and we've seen people in a variety of different industry sectors move here from a variety of different countries, and you know, I think where that economically benefits Switzerland, that's you know, attractive to the Swiss as well. But no, I don't think there's going to be a negative impact.
A lot of British recruitment companies, including yours, have rapidly and aggressively started to expand overseas. Do you think that this is going to be sustainable in the long run?
Without doubt. I mean, in the UK, we've had up to 2,000 people, and the UK is a small island and a relatively small economy compared to some of the economies we're in. And so you look at the US or China. In China, we have very little competition.
You have manpower there and some local recruitment agencies as well?
In the blue-collar area, in the staffing area, you have manpower and so on. But in the professionally qualified market, we almost have no competition. A few local players, but they're really not as effective and of a size that we are. And
so tell me about your China strategy, because I've lived there for 5 years. So I'm very interested in that as well. Are you focusing mainly on the main markets and the second-tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, and then Shenzhen, Xi'an, etc.?
Exactly that. I mean, we were always in Hong Kong and have been there for over 25 years, and that was a big market for us. And it's worth saying that Hong Kong's becoming a lot more Chinese. I don't know if you know.
Absolutely.
You'll know Hong Kong well, but they're even going to rename the streets and give them Chinese names, which is very unusual and will take us a while to get used to, I'm sure, when we go there. But no, we opened for business in Shanghai. We did it organically, and it took us a while to understand the Chinese culture and how to adapt our own culture to the local market.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, you have to look at the key hurdles to get over. How do you hire good Chinese people into the business. You're not going to have a big business in China just with Westerners. You need local Chinese people. How do you hire the right ones? And then more importantly, keep them. Train them to become successful recruiters, because everyone we hire near enough comes outside of the industry. And then we have to turn them into managers, directors that can then grow so that we can become bigger. So we went to Shanghai and did that, and Beijing. And we did initially focus on the multinationals. So the multinationals are quite familiar with us. They deal with us in other cities. But thereafter, we started dealing more and more with the local market. From those two markets, you're right, we opened in second-tier cities, Shenzhen, a city of 12, 15 million people that's emerged over...
Bigger than the population of Switzerland.
Exactly.
And do you feel like in the recruitment space that people are becoming more aware of the corporate culture and understanding as well of different cultures as well in China?
100%. You won't have a long-term relationship without the personalities working, and that's life. Doesn't matter whether it's a company or a personal relationship. And so the culture of an organisation is critical to being able to retain staff and for staff to flourish. And there has to be a match between the individual and the company. But Chinese are moving jobs more frequently. There is also the emergence of a much bigger sector that requires more highly skilled people. So, for example, the day of just making it cheap in China is largely gone. It's more about making it more sophisticated, more technical. And, take Shenzhen, we don't really have any competition, but you've got companies like Huawei, who are huge organizations. And I've been there myself and, been onto their campus, and we recruit for them, and they're one of our biggest clients.
So how are you planning to expand? Are you planning to target the big, multinationals in the future worldwide, or really targeting the big Chinese players like Huawei, Alibaba, Tencent, etc.? Where do you put your focus?
Exactly that. I mean, we're in Suzhou, so Alibaba are a big client, and many other cities now as we expand. The reality is both. Of course, we want to be recruiting for the bigger companies. That's great. But equally, we want to be recruiting for the smaller Chinese companies and helping them. And that's what we're seeing the emergence. So about 30 to 40% of our business in China now would be with Chinese companies rather than multinationals. Day one, multinationals, but as we grow and become more established. So we have now over 550 people in China. To expand and become several thousand people in China, we will have to be dealing with Chinese companies as well as multinationals.
So you're putting your eggs into many different baskets, Steve. China, India, Germany, United States as well. Is it not too much at the same time?
Well, it's a challenge getting around them all, but no, it's not. I mean, we've got a priority of 5 of these really high potential markets, and we've got a couple of others like India and Japan. India, you mentioned there, where again, in India, we have no international competition. There's one significant local player. It's a huge economy. I mean, arguably could one day be as big as China's, if not more, and a very well-educated employee situation. And so there's a big opportunity. And
let's talk about the US market as well, Steve. And Donald Trump, of course, has been pushing for infrastructure investments as well. Especially the construction sector is, I guess, booming for your business as well to recruit more people. Is Trump good or bad for your business?
Look, time will tell, I guess. Good and bad. He's described a wall that was going to separate the US from Mexico, and we have a very big business in Mexico. That wall hasn't materialised.
The job market has been such a huge focus ever since he got elected.
It has. I mean, I think he's trying to do that, but I don't think it's just necessarily the decisions that he's making that's helping the job market there. There are many other factors, and of course, we're relatively small to the overall market there. But you're right, construction is a really big opportunity. Both infrastructure projects, which arguably he's pushing for, but also residential and many other areas. And so construction will soon become our biggest discipline in the US. But I think coming from a small base, the opportunity with so many large cities is enormous. And again, not much structured competition. A lot of local competitors in different cities, but not really any big, significant national competitors.
Why is there a lack of competition? I mean, people must be spotting the opportunities just like you do.
I think they do. They spot them on a local basis within a city where they're from, and they establish themselves perhaps in the discipline that they understand, and they do well enough. And don't have the ambition, I guess, to grow that and take it further, either nationally or globally, as we have. Now,
because you have a big business in the United States and a big business in China as well, yes. How is the US-China trade war impacting your business?
So far, it isn't.
Do you expect any impact?
Well, we hope not. I mean, you know, the reality is that both economies at the moment are very strong, and they're still indicating that they will remain strong. And again, there's a lot of jostling and negotiating going on at the moment. You would like to think, because it's so important for both economies, that they'll come to an agreement that's sensible and works for both. I mean, that's where you hope all negotiations end, isn't it? And the same with us in Brexit. The reality at the moment is that there's a lot of bravado going on from both sides, I think, and a little bit of a standoff, but you'd like to think they would sit down and actually work out a constructive way forward, because imports work both ways. Let's look a little bit further beyond. How is digitization impacting the recruitment industry? Look, this is giving us a really big opportunity, because the reality is that the world is moving jobs more often. They're working in different ways, in flexible ways, contract, temp, part-time, full-time, and so on. How are you using blockchain already? Already, correct. There are methods. At the moment, we're largely using applications to sift candidates for us, to put them in front of our consultants quicker. What we've quickly established and always believed is that there is room for the human in this process, and always will be. The human interaction to establish whether a candidate's strong enough for a role or whether they're suited in personality to the culture of an organisation will always be a human. But to actually sieve down the numbers of candidates that operate on social media, on job boards and so on, down to a tight pool of candidates that are appropriate to a particular job, then we need applications, we need digital technologies. But still, the challenges from the robots and the rise of the machine are there, right? So, for example, McKinsey has this number: 800 million people could lose their jobs worldwide in the next couple of years because of automation. What impact are you expecting? Look, of course, robots will appear and take over certain jobs. And I know sometimes when you answer the phone, you don't know whether you're talking to a human or a robot. I have to say the jobs, I think, will largely get replaced by different types of jobs. And like I said earlier, I started as a recruitment consultant 32 years ago. A lot of the job titles and the types of jobs that I was recruiting for back then barely exist today, and a lot of the jobs we're recruiting today are very different. And I think rather than people will lose their jobs and then not have work is wrong. They'll lose possibly the jobs that they've got, and they'll have to do and retrain for different jobs. We're going to have an ageing workforce. We're going to have more care jobs, I suspect. We're going to have more leisure jobs. If we're in theory, there's more time for us to enjoy our leisure, then clearly we're going to have to enjoy it somehow without probably just robots running. And is your business in danger as well? I don't think so. I mean, we've done a lot of work to try and establish that and prove it. We have to prove it to our shareholders and our own staff, of course. No, I don't think so, particularly at the end of the market that we're focused on, because we are focused on qualified, white-collar professional staff. We're really not at the volume end of the market, where it's perhaps more commoditized. You know, if I wanted 100 people that all did exactly the same job and it was a low-skilled job, then possibly some of the process to finding those candidates and testing them could be automated. But when you're looking for one lawyer or one accountant to work in your organization, who could be your future CFO, then I think the human element is probably always going to be there. And we're pretty confident of that. And I think our shareholders are as well. There's a shift in priorities, however, at the moment with the millennials and the Generation Y. How do you think is this impacting the recruitment industry? Because they prefer to be startups now, entrepreneurs, self-made millionaires and billionaires. So how is this changing the industry? Not everyone can be. I think that's the reality. Look, some people will continue, I'm sure, to set up companies and be multimillionaires, but a lot of us will end up working for organisations. What you've got to do is create an environment that allows them to be entrepreneurial whilst working for you. I think that's the happy balance. Very few are brave enough, smart enough that they'll go off and become billionaires. And I think there was a term, intrapreneurs, where basically they can have their entrepreneurial flair let loose within an organisation to maybe set up a new country for you or a new business within the organisation, or even work in new departments that are emerging within your organisation that are focused on things like digitalisation. So you've got to create a culture that is flexible and works for the type of people we're hiring today. And it's very different from the type of people we were hiring 30 years ago.
You have an experience of some 32 years, Steve. So if we look into the future, which are the most important skills for a young person these days? Maybe especially in Switzerland.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, you've got to, as a young person, work out where your strengths lie very quickly. And the quicker you do that and the less you're moving around from industry to industry, probably the better. So you've got to work out not only where your skills are based, and not all of us are vocational and know exactly what we want to do with the rest of our career. So, you know, you've got to work that out. You've also got to work out where you're going to thrive the most in terms of the culture that's going to most suit your personality. And when you've done that, you can start to settle down. So I guess the skills that I would recommend to a young person is the analytical ones, the exploratory ones where they go around and really, you know, push the boundaries of what they're doing to try and find out exactly what their strengths, their weaknesses are, and what their personality is going to work well with.
Let's talk about the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap report as well. Now, in 2017, last year, it showed that women, on average, they earned about $12,000 versus a man who got some $21,000. How to close this gap?
Well, obviously, that's worrying. I've got 3 daughters. I would hate to think they're paid less than, you know, a colleague who did exactly the same job as a male. And, you know, clearly that data relates to a lot of populations around the world and a lot of job types. I mean, first of all, to say it at Page, we've looked at ourselves and we've looked in the mirror and we're absolutely confident that, you know, somebody with the same skill set who's working the same number of days and the same job title is paid the same as a male. And we judge people only on performance. I think companies have got to do this, and they've got to literally lay bare their statistics and prove.
New global standards and new initiatives on a global level.
Yeah, we do, because if we're not careful, we're not comparing apples with pears, you know, and that can easily happen. Because, you know, we don't want to be comparing a lady that's chosen to work part-time with somebody who's working full-time, because of course there'll be a price difference. And we must make sure that we are literally comparing people at the same level of experience, the same number of years. And when we've got those right, and we've got facts to work with, then we must make sure we fix it.
And who should take these initiatives? Is it governments, national governments, local governments, or, for example, the United Nations with the International Labour Organization?
Probably governments, and it is difficult because it also it has to be relatively local because different cultures have different approaches. You know, strangely, in China, for example, 85% of my staff are women. So you could say I've got a gender inequality the other way. It's just the nature of work that we do is seen more attractive by women than it is for men. And so you can't just have a set of rules that are going to work around the world imposed by the UN. It has to be, I think, local, but also it has to be the responsibility of business leaders. You know, company by company, we should be making sure this isn't happening. And that's often down to the culture that's set at the head of a company and by the boards and so on. So they've got to have objectives to improve. And what they need to do is look at how they stand right now and what equality looks like and how to get there.
The hashtag #MeToo movement has changed a couple of things there in terms of corporate culture. Do you think they will last, these kind of, you know, impacts and changes that we have seen?
Well, again, this is a cultural thing, isn't it? That people weren't brave enough to come out and make a complaint when perhaps something happened, when there was an issue, if they were being sexually harassed or whatever the issue was. And it's taken one person to be brave enough that's then actually got others to come out and clearly highlight a problem that's far bigger than perhaps was originally thought. That's sad in itself. It really is. I mean, you've got to, again, create an environment where people feel that they can literally talk openly about issues. And I realise that's not always easy, but there are ways round it. You know, you can have anonymous methods of actually people being able to make complaints or highlight an issue, and they can be guaranteed anonymity or whatever. And I think every company should be able to afford to do that and to allow people to have the voice to highlight a problem.
Before we go, Steve, last question. Which is the best job to have in the future?
Mine, of course, but maybe yours. Maybe yours. But
I'm sure it's mine.
I enjoy my company a lot, and I think my personality matches the culture of the organisation, and it's great fun travelling around the world and seeing Page people.
And great having you here in Switzerland in the studio. Thank you so much for your time, Steve.
Thank you.